And for more on what to expect from the summit between President Lee Jae Myung and his Japanese counterpart, Sanae Takaichi, we're joined today by Dr. Choi Eun-mi, Research Fellow at Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Choi, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me today.
So before we get into the details, a lot of attention is on where the summit's being held as it's taking place in Andong, that's President Lee's hometown, right? What message or significance does that carry?
Well, in simple term, Andong is not just a location at this time, it's a part of the message. As it knows well, the Andong is the President Lee's hometown, so it gives the meeting a personal and symbolic touch. Another important point is reciprocity. President Lee previously visited Nara, Prime Minister Takaichi's political home base. Now Prime Minister Takaichi is visiting Andong, President Lee's hometown. So this can be seen a kind of maybe the hometown-to-hometown diplomacy. So this sends a message that the two leaders are trying to build trust not only through formal diplomacy, but also through more personal and direct communication. And at the same time, the holding the summit outside Seoul also shows the President Lee's emphasis on the regional balance and local symbolic. So it shows the trust building, reciprocity, and a desire to give Korea-Japan relation a warmer and more stable tone.
I see. And what might be on the agenda when President Lee meets Takaichi today? What do you think will be their top priority? How do you think today's meeting will play out?
Well, at this time also, the agenda will likely include bilateral relations, economic security, regional security, and of course the historical issues. But I think the top priority will be how South Korea and Japan can coordinate in a more uncertain regional environment. While both countries are facing similar pressure, there is a North Korea's nuclear and missile threats and the intensifying U.S.-China rivalry and the supply chains and the growing uncertainty in U.S. foreign policy. Because of these things, Seoul and Tokyo have a strong reason to keep communication channels open. Well, but I do not think today's meeting will produce a dramatic breakthrough, but the point is to keep the relationship stable and prevent problems from escalating. So I expect the meeting to be constructive today, but cautious. The two leaders will probably try to show that Korea and Japan can coordinate where they need to, while carefully managing areas where they still disagree. As the Korea and Japan do not need to agree on everything, but they need to keep talking.
Right, like you just mentioned, South Korea and Japan face similar pressures, and today's meeting comes after U.S. President Donald Trump's recent visit to Beijing. And amid intensifying rivalry between the United States and China, analysts say Seoul and Tokyo both face pressure to balance security cooperation with Washington and economic relations with Beijing. How might the two leaders discuss bilateral cooperation and geopolitical risks here?
Well, as it well known, South Korea and Japan are both U.S. allies, but both also have deep economic ties with China. So this puts them in different positions. We are structurally exposed to U.S.-China competition. So the two leaders will likely discuss how to cooperate in this area where their interests overlap. This includes the supply chains, semiconductors, and critical minerals, batteries, energy security, and also North Korea. However, the cooperation does not mean that South Korea and Japan exactly the same position on China. Japan tends to, compared to Korea, Japan tends to see China more directly as a security challenges. South Korea also has to consider China's role on the Korean Peninsula and its strong economic ties with China. So the realistic approach is not just full alignment, it is selective cooperations. Seoul and Tokyo can work together where their interests are shared while maintaining some room for diplomatic flexibility. The important point is that the Korea-Japan cooperation is becoming less optional and more necessary. The environment, the regional environment is pushing the two countries closer together, even if the domestic politics and the historical issues are still creates limits.
Right, and like you just mentioned, the critical issue that remains are, of course, historical disputes, as they have long been a thorn in bilateral relations between these two countries. So will the two sides address those issues today, and how might they use today's meeting as an opportunity to sort of help resolve these historical disputes?
Well, the historical issues will not disappear from Korea and Japan relations. They are always part of the background under the relations between two countries. Issues, such as forced labor issues, comfort women, and also the things the Yasukuni sharing visits. Still affect public opinion and the political trust between two countries. But I do not expect today's summit to produce a major breakthrough on history. The more realistic goal is not to solve everything at once, but to manage these issues carefully. The two governments need to avoiding letting historical disputes paralyze the entire relationship. That does not mean ignoring history. In South Korea, that would be a political unrealistic. But it does not mean that keeping communication open and handling sensitive issues through dialogue rather than confrontations. So one useful approach is to separate the relations into two tracks. One track is future-oriented cooperations, security, economy, and technology, youth exchanges, and regional challenges. The other track is the careful management of unsolved historical issues. The key is not to pretend that history is over. The key is to prevent history from controlling the entire relationships. So today's meeting can be useful if it creates a political atmosphere where both sides can discuss difficult issues without immediately falling into confrontations. Then itself would be a meaningful step for two countries.
I see. I guess we'll have to see how the summit plays out today. All right, Dr. Che, thank you so much for your time and insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.